Do you think it's cool when a guy like Donovan Dent, his situation where he started on JV, started as a sophomore, and then he really come on and he really deserves it. Obviously, Amari Bailey missed some games this year. He wanted as a junior, and Amari could project to be an NBA player, and it would be not a surprise if he does it. It wouldn't be surprised if he was on an NBA roster one day. But does it really, for you, does it bring something to you and what you've done over the years when a guy like Donovan Dent earns the honor fair and square on the court?
Sure, of course. He definitely deserved it. I mean, you could argue that McCain on the same team maybe should have been the guy.
Yeah.
But we sort of already had that debate, right after the state finals. We thought Donovan was going to be their number one guy off the number one team.
Sure.
And that's kind of went from there. And yes, it definitely is good when it's a player who isn't obvious. It's also good when it's a player who's maybe not as highly regarded as some of the other guys, and you never know how they're going to develop later on. Kids all develop at different stages, and he's going to New Mexico. It's not splashy, and it's not a blue blood type of college, but it's still solid, and he's a great player. And yeah, you definitely have to look for those kind of kids, and you can't deny them when when they should be the choice. They have to be the choice.
Sure. For this year, one of the players on this year's team stood out to Chelsea because she's a San Diego State alum. Chelsea, why don't you ask Mark about that?
Yeah, Mark, talk to me about Miles Bird. I'm a San Diego State Aztec. I have a good relationship with Brian Dutcher, the current coach, and just always rooting for them. And, my guys came up short in the tournament. I told you, I thought San Diego State might get the early upset in the first round. Just talk to me about Miles and how you think, Ronnie said he was a little bit of a utility player, kind of somebody who can do it all, which I kind of think fits, the San Diego State prototype. Just kind of talk to me about what you think he brings to the table and how he's going to fit in college.
Well, Miles is kind of interesting because he goes to school here in Stockton, where I am, Lincoln of Stockton. And in fact, Lincoln is where my son went to high school. Lincoln is probably the second or third closest school physically to where I'm located. And when Miles was coming up as a sophomore, I thought, boy, it's going to be fun to see him play a bunch of times over at Lincoln down the street, basically. And I know his father's Calvin Bird, who is a player we covered in high school way back in the day. And Calvin was a senior when Jason Kidd was a freshman at St. Joseph in Alameda. And it's just a nice history. And boy, it's going to be fun to see Miles play a bunch of times. Well, unfortunately, as you know, there was things that happened in the last few years that prevented going to games. So I actually never really got a chance to see him play until right at the end of this season when they had a home game against Modesto Christian. And Lincoln has a hard time beating Modesto Christian and St. Mary's of Stockton generally, historically, in their history. But this particular night, Miles played very well all around, and they beat him, and they beat Modesto Christian. Who would have known Modesto Christian would have ended up in the state finals and giving Centennial a run for their lives in the state finals. But Lincoln won that game. Miles had a great season. He was player of the year in the league. He does pretty much everything. I mean, he'll go in and get the rebounds on that team. He was a leader. You could tell that Modesto Christian was focusing their defense on stopping him, but he still found ways to score. He made a couple threes. He showed he could shoot a little bit from mid-range game. He's a tough defender, gets the rebounds, does the dirty work. Can pretty, as you said, utility can always have a negative connotation. You don't do anything really well, but in his case, he does a lot of things very, very well.